just don't understand it. Where's Richard?
Communicate a Shakespeare that is about how we feel and how we think today.
Yes, of course.
Fuck.
So when it comes to Shakespeare's and people's understandings of the plays, without having lived the audience's context, there's this massive disconnect in cultural understanding, and so it becomes quite difficult for contemporary viewers to understand what is meant by sin, death, and hell have set their marks on him, and what exactly this has relevance to in terms of Richard's characterization, and Pacino knows this. Do you know what the Levitical doctrine is?
No.
See, he relies on reframing the representations of characters and ideals based on his considered introspection and what connotations in the 1997 culture of context evoke such, amongst universal themes of humanity like family and relationships. Such perspective topics are intertextual to Richard's original themes, such as the women, social influence, and power, where Shakespeare's original construction complied to his own audience. The intention between the two? To entertain and to inform, and you see it amongst every form of literature, and the way that authors do this is by connecting with their audience and playing around. Psychologically, we as humans take interest in something only if it involves our lives or something that we know, and so we pick it apart subconsciously and notice the subtleties and innuendos of culture and behavior, but only if we have human connections to it. Now is the winter of our discontent. See, the Elizabethans contrast with contemporary audiences by about 400 years, so you have to consider that, right? And the intensity behind their beliefs, the witchcraft, Protestantism or their religion, the way they lived, the lack of medical knowledge and psychology, is to a degree confusing and primitive to our modern methods. And it's this gap of perspective underlying the language, of course, that makes Shakespeare so difficult for most to understand. For both, however, we can connect across the universal representations of human behavior, instinct, emotion, relationships, and etc., and we can logically understand the formats in which the Elizabethans believed in and worked in. And so it's only really these contextual blockades which spur people away. So, of these two people, who do you think you'd be more likely to understand?
Probably the one on the left.
The left?
Probably the one on the left.
Go on the right, because they're in
Right?
modern day.
That one.
Yeah?
I will actually know a girl.
The one with the phone, and I'll talk more comfortable with him.
Here are the ideas and themes of Shakespeare to a contemporary audience can be quite difficult without changing the context of the play itself. And so what Pacino has done to allow a better understanding is reframed it in the form of a docodrama, which the play is shown and intercut with explanations of characters and the plot line, as well as given perspectives of the actors and public interviews, which allows this modern connection and understanding to the people outside of the play and the perspective Pacino portrays of our world, and further to those inside the play through the use of emotively alluding filmic techniques, such as camera angles, costuming, symbolism, motifs, oral, music, as vectors of emotion and psychology. So, for a couple of examples within Shakespeare's representation, he relied heavily on the religious, social, supernatural, and political beliefs of his society to justify the characters' behaviors and persuade and perspectives by emotive association through connotations. And we see this dominantly within Richard himself. His deformity, right, it follows part of the biblical texts called the Levitical doctrine, wherein he is marked by God as a being of evil, by deformity, which immediately paints him as the Machiavellian character in this play. The greater he sins, the more corrupt he becomes, and such is betrayed to the extent of killing children, which even to our modern day steps over the line. When Richard is brought to justice at the hands of Richmond and Margaret's rich crafty prophecy, and it's complete, these factors of God embedding power within individuals to commit his justice at the disturbance of the great chain of being is reinforced among conforming to predeterminism and fate. And so, such conventions, if we were to look at them in comparison to our more scientifically based society, the glorification of God and the further introspective reactions to the events, character arcs, and teachings are lost. So Pacino targets the contemporary advanced psychological understandings that we have of behaviour as being integrated to these original ideas, and tries to evoke pathos by playing on both modern social pressures and the universal moral relations across time, such as family and morality. His deformities and the time's discrimination because of such are targeted in combination with the juxtaposition to his brothers as successors in relationships amongst filmic techniques, where the audience is in having these primal emotive and conceptual understandings are evoked in their analytical cognition by these connections of what we know today. To put simply, with the idea of language as being one of the biggest barriers, if you were to make someone feel bad about themselves and justify why, right? The Elizabethans would have said something like, "Thou hast defied myself and his Lord's Lord and conspiring under the devil's son of ego," where we might say, "You've really hurt me, man," all because of your selfish desires to feel better about yourself. And see, the two imply the same logical situations, but the second has more of an impact into delivering the message of don't hurt people for your own validation for us, because we can understand it clearly and we subconsciously imagine being in both shoes. And essentially, this is what Pacino has done. He considers the reaction a modern audience would have to a scene and how this translates to Shakespeare, right? And so he looks at the similar conventions between the two and he plays on such. He reframes representation, form and medium based on introspection of audience in conveying his intended perspectives of our own and Shakespeare's world.